our best people where they're needed most, both leaders and teachers. I think the Beacon Initiative gets at the root cause, as we've shared several presentations with the board around our work with the University of Virginia to actually get to the root cause so that there wouldn't necessarily be one approach with the 14 Beacon schools. I go back to what Erica said in one of our recent meetings that I think about every day. In our pre-K 8s, the students are there for 10 years. All but 4 years of their school career are in that one school. So I couldn't agree more in terms of that root cause being incredibly important. And I think it is important to keep that right front and center on this table as we have these conversations. But I do think we certainly are not sitting and watching schools fail. I think everyone's clear on that. Are we getting it at the pace we need? Absolutely not. But I do think what you will see come out of Beacon is 14 not similar approaches, because the root cause at Garinger is going to be different than the root cause at Vance. Completely different communities, neighborhoods, faculties, circumstances. And so I think we continue to refine our getting to that root cause. An example of that would be that 2 years ago we were not providing mental health services in our schools beyond what a guidance counselor could provide. Today we have 66 schools that we have on-site mental health providers in our schools. Because one of the things we've learned is that, and what we heard from our teachers, is that the mental health issues of these students are standing in the way of our ability to make academic progress.
We've done away with our ability to inspect what we expect. And I don't know at this point we even define what we expect so that we can know that we're doing it. I know that the policy equity committee had kind of gone astray from what the board wanted. I think in absence of anything, there's not a way to inspect what we expect around equity. And I'll lift up our IB program, particularly at our high schools. If you look at that program across the spectrum, from your more Caucasian schools to your browner schools, there is a discernible difference in terms of the instruction, in terms of the output, in terms of the expectation, in terms of the experience. And we have not yet fixed that. We have schools where almost all kids are receiving that IB diploma because of experience, the inputs, the instruction, the expectations. And we have schools where you have fewer than 5 or 6 kids receiving that IB diploma. And that shouldn't be the case.
Question this slide poses, I believe those things in the first bullet are the items that can have the greatest impact, and I think student assignment can have an impact, but in a subordinate way. But I think clearly the reporting we've received around 88 has been entirely inadequate. It's failed to bring to light the issues that we need to focus on, or give us clarity as a board around how we're doing implementing that policy. And I would suggest that we ask our superintendent to develop a draft report in accordance with ADA, and that we work with our superintendent as a first step towards creating a report that will better serve our needs. And that may likely then lead to, do we need citizen input in preparing and submitting that report? But I think what we've had so far, to your point, Tom, is just failed to meet our needs.
I was on the journey with the equity committee for a long stretch of this last decade. What I would offer is, in the absence of that, one of the things that I would say, having been with that committee, is that we have started providing the board with reports around how certain groups of schools have done against additional resources, i.e. how our Project Lift schools are doing with an additional infusion of investment of the inputs, and how the Beacon schools are doing. That will become a report. Our strategic staffing schools, our pre-K 8 schools. So where we've made investments over multiple years, We've showed how those investments have either proved to support student achievement or not. And we've moved in different directions, or we've refined our strategies as a result. So now that's on just the investment of additional resources. So that is one way that the board is having an opportunity to weigh, okay, we've had an investment of X million dollars, or how are our Title I schools doing with the additional resources that they are providing? Or because Erica, you've asked that question many times in terms of how the schools are using those dollars. So those are opportunities in the absence of that equity report. And I think we did get to sort of a interesting place with that report, where I was calling schools to see if they were offering chess as a metric of everybo's getting the same experience, whether that was helping student achievement or not. I mean, if you had 4 people in a chess club, you got a check. If you had 100 people in a chess club. So it got to a place where I felt like it was an exercise that wasn't giving the board what they needed. But I would agree and would welcome the opportunity to work with a smaller group of board members to figure out what the template ought to look like, what ought to be in that annual report. Because quite frankly, with 3 years of experience, I'm not sure where I would start on an annual report around this. This doesn't mean I'm not completely willing and excited to try to take that on, but I'm not even sure what the contents would be.
I think from a sort of broad strategy or policy perspective, before we dive into individual bullets on this one, if we just consider the concepts of homeschool and magnet schools first, and what our priority is, or how we use those tools, I think we have one fundamental choice is that if we continue with the same basic setup we have today, majority of students in homeschools, smaller group in magnet schools, then we need to go through and work all these people. Another choice would be, do we consider a fundamental change from that model? In other words, do we expand our magnet offerings and the number of students in magnet schools as a way of, whether it fits the desire for many of our parents to have more choice, whether it fits the desire to attend many of these successful programs, or whatever the objective is. The other different operating model is a major expansion of magnet schools, which then decreases the number of students in home schools and puts more. And for me, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg. I don't know exactly what the effect of that would be. I need some guidance from our superintendent and staff in order to then think about, does that make the right policy decision? But to me, that's an initial fundamental sort of choice we have to make. Do we continue with the same operating model, or do we explore a rapid expansion of magnets and other programs that change the dynamics?
Erica suggested there, is homeschools and magnets. What are alternatives to homeschool student foundation besides magnets? Are there other ways of doing that? Are there other creative ways that we know about in the country or the world where there is some other thing than homeschools?
I don't feel I'm in a position to be able to pick in this multiple choice test in front of me without some analysis.
Yeah.
Because in the analysis, and maybe you should consider the reality that we are constrained with capital resources, our schools are jam-packed, we have limited opportunity to expand our staff, all those other realities that we have to make a student assignment choice in. And I'm not saying that to discount any of those choices. It's just, if we had, for instance, greater flexibility in the capacity of our schools, we could then have more moving parts to make more creative choices. I think I need some analysis from staff on what, if we go down this path with these options, what will it require that we don't have today, or what does today's current reality, how does that constrain our ability to successfully deliver? For example, if we chose B, and the reality is we really can't provide options because our schools are so tight, I don't want to go in front of the public and say we're going to give you options.
The answer is no, or maybe not, then the staff could begin creating some scenarios where there wouldn't be a homeschool choice, but there would be a new understanding of a transportation zone, and everyone within that zone is seeking a school. And it could be almost like a full lottery. But certainly the investment of time against knowing that we are not at a readiness level to imagine not having a homeschool, which is a place we've been since we've existed. And there are districts where there's no neighborhood school or homeschool. And we certainly don't have to reinvent ourselves looking at their models, but with sort of one staff person here, before we chase those rabbits, we really need to know that, gosh, we can't imagine in this next iteration that we wouldn't have a homeschool for every kid. Because
I can't imagine that.
I can too.
you can.
I can't, and I said, because when this came out, I was shocked, because that really wasn't what I heard when I sat in those conversations. There was a lot of talk about madness, there was a lot of talk about diversity, and I felt like this fell short.
I'm with Ruby. I think the reality of charter schools we have to face, and the fact that the homeschool guarantee for many of our parents that is meaningless. They don't care. But on the other side of that coin, for many of our parents, a homeschool guarantee is the paramount reason why they've selected to live in charter.
Right. And there
So we
is-
got that broad spectrum, which means I think we do have to open up the thought process. Yes, considering no homeschools, and yes, considering there is a homeschool as a part of our student assignment plan, but not necessarily the number one component. So, sorry, that means a lot of staff work.
Well, and the other thing it means is, if we're not going to be able to offer a choice with integrity, let's not put it out in front of the community again, as we did before.
And we did try this choice thing in the early 2000s, right? And we didn't have room for that. And what part of what happened was that we went from what we called busing to transportation, and we actually drive more miles and have more buses than we did when we were busing, right? Isn't that still true? I know it was immediately.
Pretty comparable, I think, with the shuttle stops.
Well, but we still have a lot of, granted that we're not from home to school, but we're still running buses to do this stuff. And because we didn't have choices for people, for students, it made it very difficult, even if we had the transportation. And I don't recall how much our transportation went up before I got on the board, but didn't our transportation needs go up pretty high with the first choice plan?
Because, yes, absolutely, because we were transporting to students to all other non-magnet schools within that particular choice center.
I think we also have to keep in mind the information that Dr. Johnson presented to us about the fact that the community and our schools are going to continue to get browner. There are fewer white kids in our schools. There are fewer kids of means in our schools. So as we try to get a different level of diversity, we're doing it in a backdrop that's exceedingly different than what it's been in the past, and it's going to continue to be exceedingly different. So I say all that to say we have to begin with the end in mind, but the end is different from anything we've ever seen before.